I never thought betrayal could feel so quiet. It didn't arrive like thunder or a crashing wave. It didn't scream in my ears. It crept in slowly, like a shadow folding over my life, one small lie at a time. My name is Shu Yun, and this is not a love story. 8 years of marriage. 2 miscarriages. A womb left tired and a heart even more so. Doctors told me it was David, my husband. A condition called oligospermia. Low sperm count. The chances of conceiving were slim. He handled the news with a blank stare and a nod. I remember that day more clearly than my wedding. We cried together that night. Or maybe only I cried. It's hard to remember now. Later, we decided together, or at least I believed we did, that it was time to stop trying. I got an IUD inserted, and with it, I buried the last of my hopes. I told myself love was enough. Family wasn't about blood. A year after that decision, David came home with a child. His distant cousin had passed away, he said. The boy had no one. No family. No future. David looked into my eyes and asked me to be a mother to him. I didn't hesitate. I thought I was being brave. Kind. Noble even. But kindness without truth is a trap. I see that now. I raised the boy as my own. I fed him, bathed him, stayed up through nights of fever and fear. I cheered at his school plays. I packed his lunches. I smiled through exhaustion and heartbreak, convinced that motherhood was something you do, not something you earn. Years passed. I helped him get into college. I bought him his first suit. I stood quietly at the back of the room when he got married. When their child, my grandchild, was born, I babysat for hours while still working 2 jobs. I pawned my jewelry to help them buy an apartment in a Tier 1 city. I gave them everything. But when I fell ill, truly, fatally ill, it wasn't my hand he held. It was hers. His biological mother. The woman I didn't know existed. That's when he told me. He wasn't adopted. He was David's son. My husband had lied to me for 2 decades. That child I loved like my own was never mine. Not by law. Not by truth. Just by delusion. By pity. I died in that hospital bed, not of cancer, but of rage. A deep, burning hatred that even death couldn't smother. But death didn't keep me. I woke up not in heaven, not in peace, but back in my old home. On the exact day David brought the boy home. I was reborn. At first, I thought it was a dream. I touched my hands, looked in the mirror, stared at the old calendar on the wall. But everything was real. The same day, the same house, the same face in the mirror, younger now, but haunted. And soon, David walked in. With the child. Just like before. Only this time, I wasn't the same woman. He said the cousin had died suddenly. He said they had no one. He said we had to help. His voice, so full of concern, almost made me forget what I already knew. But I smiled politely. And said nothing. Let him bring the child. Let him lie again. Let them all play their little game. This time, I would keep the savings book. This time, I wouldn't sell my jewelry. This time, I would watch. Closely. Carefully. They say motherhood is selfless. That women give without expecting anything in return. That love should be unconditional. I say, even love needs boundaries. That evening, David sat down beside me and talked about the child's future. About schooling. Clothes. Food. He asked if we could spare some money. I reached into the wardrobe and pulled out 2 passbooks. This one is yours, I said. That one's mine. You can check the balance. His face tightened. What do you mean yours and mine? He asked. We're married. Exactly, I replied, and all these years, I've paid for this household. I've cooked, cleaned, and covered every bill. And now you want to raise your cousin's child with my money, too. David's voice sharpened. That's not fair. We're a team. You're talking like a stranger. Then let's be strangers, I said quietly. We didn't speak much after that. But I saw the panic in his eyes. I saw the guilt he still thought he could hide. He thought I didn't know. But I knew everything. I knew who the boy was. I knew who his real mother was. I knew the future they had planned for me, a life of quiet servitude while they built their legacy on my back. Not this time. The next morning, I opened a new bank account. I began saving, investing, planning. Not for us. For me. For once in my life, I would be the one making decisions. I would be the one choosing who deserved my time, my love, my money. No more open palms. No more sacrifices wrapped in silence. I started keeping a journal. Not of memories, but of strategies. How to protect my savings. Where to invest. What documents to copy. Who to trust. And who never to forgive. David still came home every night, playing his role. He called me honey. He rubbed my shoulders. He made dinner when I was tired. But none of it mattered. I had seen the truth of him, the cowardice, the deceit, and once that curtain falls, there's no putting it back. As for the boy, I watched him. He was sweet. Innocent. Barely old enough to know the world he was being pulled into. But I didn't let myself feel anything. Not yet. I reminded myself, he was not mine. He was the son of betrayal. The living proof of a lie. And yet, there were moments. Small cracks. A crooked smile. A giggle in the hallway. A picture he drew for me, lopsided hearts and stick figures. Mom, it said. For a moment, my heart squeezed. But I hardened again. I told myself, don't forget how it ends. Because I had already seen it once. This time, I would be ready. Some betrayals kill you once. Others, every day after. I had been given a second chance, but the weight of knowing the future made everything feel heavier. Every word David said, every smile he forced, every promise he made, I could see through it like smoke in a glass. The boy, Mason, that's what David named him again, just like last time, sat quietly on the couch, legs swinging, eyes wide with uncertainty. He didn't know yet that his existence had rewritten my entire life. That he was the center of a storm I had weathered once before and would never walk through again. But still, he smiled at me. Still, he called me mommy. I couldn't respond. Not fully. Not yet. Love is powerful. But so is memory. And mine was stained with too much blood and bitterness to offer anything pure. The house felt different now. Cold, calculated. I had installed locks on drawers David never noticed, started filing away documents in a safety deposit box he didn't know existed. I split the grocery money. Logged every bill. I wasn't living with a husband anymore. I was living with a potential threat. And I wasn't going to die again because I trusted the wrong man. One evening, David came home later than usual. He didn't call. He didn't text. And when he finally walked through the door, he smelled of wine and cigarette ash, both things he claimed he'd quit years ago. Long day? I asked, my tone ice. He chuckled. Meetings ran late. Traffic. You know how it is. But I didn't know. That's what he said the first time, too. Right before I found out about her, the woman who had carried his child while I miscarried in silence. Did your cousin's family call? I asked casually. David froze. No. Why? They haven't asked about the boy? No, they trust us. I nodded, smiling slightly. Of course. Why wouldn't they? He avoided my eyes. That night, I watched him sleep. Not out of affection. Out of study. I used to think I knew this man. The curve of his back, the rhythm of his breath. But now all I saw was a mask. A man who had built his entire life on a foundation of someone else's sacrifice, mine. And for what? A child he couldn't even claim as his publicly? No. This time, I would expose it all. The next week, I told David I wanted to visit my family in the city. He didn't ask why. He never did. In his mind, I was still the same obedient wife who bent without breaking, who accepted betrayal like a tax on marriage. But I wasn't her anymore. I packed a small bag and took the earliest train. In my pocket was a lock of the child's hair and a single fingernail clipping collected during his last bath. I had cut it myself. Gently. Lovingly. Like a mother would. But I wasn't his mother. Not biologically. Not legally. Not anymore. In the city, I went straight to the hospital. Quiet, efficient, no questions asked. I submitted the samples and paid the expedited fee. Results in 5 days. 5 days to confirm what I already knew. And yet, something inside me trembled. Because what if I was wrong? What if, in this life, David hadn't lied? What if this boy was adopted, truly, and I was letting my bitterness write a false script? That thought shook me. It haunted me. But 5 days later, the result arrived. Just like before, 99.9% match. The boy was David's biological son. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't blink. I just stood there, cold as marble, reading the report. Nothing had changed. Destiny had sent me back not to escape my fate, but to face it differently. This time, I would not die in a hospital bed. This time, they would pay. I returned home quietly. David greeted me with a smile, arms open, as if we were newlyweds again. I let him hug me. Then I told him I wanted to make some changes around the house. He looked surprised, but nodded. I think we should start saving more intentionally, I said. Maybe open separate household accounts. Just for clarity. He hesitated. Is something wrong? Of course not, I smiled. It's just good to have boundaries. You know, in case of emergencies. He agreed. He always did when I sounded calm. And so began the division. Of money. Of space. Of life. I went back to work. I started tutoring again, part-time, in the evenings. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every rupee, every dollar, mine. I cooked less. Cleaned less. I paid a neighbor's daughter to help out during the week. David frowned, but said nothing. He didn't recognize this version of me because he had never bothered to know me at all. Meanwhile, I watched the boy grow. He was kind. Thoughtful. He helped me clean the table after meals. He made cards with crayons and told me he loved me. Once, he tripped over a toy and burst into tears, and instinctively, I ran to him. He clung to me like he belonged. And a terrible ache filled my chest. Because no matter how much I hated David, this child, this innocent, sweet child, had never asked to be born from betrayal. He was just a boy. But he would grow. He would become a man. And just like before, he would stand beside his biological mother while I lay dying. I couldn't allow it to happen again. So I hardened. I began pulling back, inch by inch. Fewer hugs. Less softness. Less affection. I told myself I was protecting him, and myself. But it didn't feel like protection. It felt like punishment. Some nights, I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the way he used to giggle when I tickled his feet, how he once baked me a crooked birthday cake with too much salt and too little sugar, and how I had eaten it with tears in my eyes, telling him it was perfect. I wondered, could I really go through with it? Could I really build a life where love was denied to punish the man who betrayed me? But then I'd remember the hospital bed. The look on David's face when he brought her to visit me, his mistress, the mother of his child. The way they both stood at the foot of my deathbed, whispering, smirking, pretending to grieve while I faded. No, I couldn't forget that. I wouldn't. This life was mine now. And if I had to sacrifice the idea of motherhood to keep my soul intact, I would do it. I had already done worse. By winter, I began preparing my next move. I found an investment group in the city, real estate, small scale, mostly women investors. I attended meetings quietly, listened, learned. I made my first investment by spring, a plot of land outside town. Small, modest. But mine. David never asked. He assumed I was shopping. The child, too young to understand, kept calling me mommy. And I kept pretending. Some nights, I stared at him while he slept, soft cheeks, quiet breath, and asked God to forgive me. For what I had done. For what I might do. I didn't know if I was becoming a villain or a survivor. Maybe I was both. But one thing was certain. This time, I wouldn't lose. There's a strange silence that comes when resentment settles into your bones. Not the loud kind that explodes in arguments. The quiet kind. The kind that drips like a leaking faucet, slow and steady, day after day, until it floods everything. David didn't notice the silence growing between us. He thought he had balance, a wife who asked for nothing and a child who adored him. But what he didn't know was that behind the silence, I was rewriting everything. The woman I had once been soft, forgiving, trusting, she was dead. In her place stood someone different. Someone patient. Strategic. Someone who counted everything: hours, bills, betrayals. By spring, the cracks had deepened. David's cousin's wife came by one afternoon, holding a basket of fruit and wearing a smile that made my stomach twist. She sat on the couch like it was her own, eyes drifting casually across the room, as if checking inventory. "How's the boy doing?" she asked, her voice syrupy. "He's been adjusting well?" I smiled politely. "He's eating, sleeping, breathing. The usual." She laughed too loudly. "You always had such a sharp sense of humor." She didn't care about the boy. She cared about what he represented. A pawn on their board. "We're grateful," she added, placing a delicate hand on her chest. "Really? I know this wasn't easy for you." I tilted my head. "No one forced us. You said you had no means to raise him. We stepped in. That's what family does, right?" Her eyes flickered, a moment of unease before she recovered. "Yes, yes, of course. But you know how people talk. Some think you're being too generous. That you gave up too much." I leaned forward. "Are you one of those people?" A pause. Then she smiled. "I just think it would have been easier if the child came from closer to home. Maybe from David's brother. Someone with shared blood. Not a total outsider." There it was. Not even a full year into raising the boy, and they were already scheming. "I didn't realize we were running an adoption agency," I said coldly. "Oh no, of course not," she said quickly. "But if you ever reconsider, our family has options. 2 sons, strong and healthy. We're not attached. Take your pick." I stared at her. A woman offering up her children like a trade. It would have been comical if it weren't so grotesque. "I'll keep that in mind," I said flatly. She left soon after, the fruit basket untouched on the counter. A few hours later, David called me into the kitchen. "What did you say to her?" he asked, eyes narrowed. "What I always say," I replied. "The truth. She said you were cold. Unwilling to listen." "Then maybe next time, she should bring tea instead of suggestions." David didn't push further. He never did when he knew I was right. But that night, he asked if we could dip into our savings, his savings, to help his cousin's widow with some housing situation. I didn't even flinch. "No," I said. He blinked. "Just a small loan." "From whose account?" "From ours." "I've already split the funds, David. That money isn't ours anymore." His lips tightened. "You're making this too complicated." "No," I whispered. "You did that years ago. I'm just making sure I'm not the one who pays for it again." He walked away. Slower than usual. His shoulders weren't as straight. Maybe for the first time, he was starting to feel the edges of the trap he built. And I wasn't done yet. That week, I met with a friend from college, Mei Lin, a sharp-eyed woman who had built a business flipping co-op apartments. She remembered me from back in the day, said she was surprised I still lived in the same neighborhood. "I thought you'd have taken over the world by now," she joked. I shrugged. Took a detour. She offered me a part-time role managing some of her rental properties, bookkeeping, tenant coordination, small stuff. It paid well and came with flexibility. I accepted on the spot. David thought I was tutoring again. I let him believe it. Every week, I tucked away a little more into my separate account. My safety net. My escape plan. Meanwhile, Mason grew. He was a good child. Better than most. He read books without being told. He wiped the table after dinner. He said please and thank you and good night. And yet, he reminded me of David in the strangest ways. Not his face. Not his voice. But the small things. The way he tilted his head when he was curious. The way he squinted when something confused him. The way his temper flickered and flared quickly, only to fade just as fast. Sometimes I'd catch myself softening toward him. And I hated that. Because it made things harder. One night, I woke up from a nightmare, not of death, but of sickness. Of lying in that hospital bed again, watching him stand at my side, calling me Mom, while his real mother held his hand. In the dream, I tried to scream. But no sound came out. I woke up in a sweat. And decided I couldn't afford dreams anymore. That morning, I changed my will. Quietly. Cleanly. In my previous life, I left everything to David. The apartment. The investments. Even the retirement plan I'd built over years. This time, not a cent. I wrote it all under my name. Stipulated private beneficiaries. Protected assets. No one would feed off me again. David was still smiling, still playing house, but I could feel the shift. He knew something was changing. He just didn't know what. One night, as we lay in bed, he turned to me and asked, "Do you love him?" I didn't answer at first. "Who?" "The boy." I stared at the ceiling. "I don't know." "Isn't that strange?" "No," I said. "What's strange is pretending love can erase betrayal." He said nothing. The silence filled the room like fog. Eventually, he rolled over and turned off the light. That weekend, I went to visit an old co-op property that had just been listed. A modest 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine if I wanted it. I paid the deposit. My hands trembled when I signed the paperwork, not out of fear, but out of finality. This was it. The first real step toward the life I was going to build, with or without love, with or without family. A life with no debts owed to liars. No promises made in good faith only to be broken in shadows. And as I stepped out into the afternoon sun, I realized something. I wasn't running away from my past. I was walking toward my future. One slow, deliberate step at a time. Everyone tells you that healing takes time. What they don't tell you is that time doesn't heal betrayal. It just teaches you how to wear it better. Like a coat that never quite fits, but you learn to live in it anyway. By summer, my days had taken on a quiet rhythm. Work, paperwork, rental inspections, bookkeeping, and silence, always the silence between David and me, filling up the house like fog no one could clear. Mason, though, was growing. He had reached the age where questions began to multiply. Why this? Why that? Why don't we have pictures of me as a baby? Why don't I look like either of you? I answered carefully. Never with lies, just empty truths. We weren't the best at taking pictures back then. You were born during a hard time. A lot of things were forgotten. He accepted the answers. For now. But I could see the doubt forming behind his eyes. Just like it had in the first life. I remembered when he stopped calling me Mom so easily. When he started spending more time with David. When the shift began. This time, I would get ahead of it. Not with lies. Not with punishment. With clarity. I began documenting everything. Quietly. Carefully. The full story of how David had brought him home. The paternity test. The financial records. My private journals. I wasn't going to die confused again. I wasn't going to let my version of the story be erased. If Mason ever turned on me, if he ever sided with her again, he would at least know the truth I carried. The version no one else bothered to ask about. But even with all my preparation, something started to shift inside me. A small crack. A moment that caught me off guard. It was raining that Tuesday. The sky gray and wet, thunder distant but threatening. I had forgotten my umbrella at work. By the time I made it home, my shoes were soaked, my hair a mess. Mason met me at the door with a towel. "I saw it start raining," he said shyly. "I was going to come meet you." He stood there, small and awkward, his eyes bright with concern. And something inside me crumbled. I took the towel, dried my face, and said, "Thank you." That night, I sat at the kitchen table, watching him eat, wondering how much of my pain was tied to him and how much of it was just mine. He wasn't the one who lied. He didn't choose to be born. He didn't choose to be handed off like a burden wrapped in ribbon. And yet, he was still the embodiment of everything I had lost. My time, my energy, my peace, my future. David entered the room mid-thought, shaking off his coat. "They're raising housing rates again," he said casually. "We should think about buying something soon." I didn't look up. "I already have." He paused. "You what?" "I bought a unit. Co-op housing. Signed a few months ago." His brows pulled together. "You didn't even tell me." I didn't think I had to. His voice grew tight. "We're still married. But we're not a partnership." He didn't answer. He just sat down slowly, staring at his hands like he was suddenly unsure how they worked. "Where did the money come from?" he asked quietly. "My work. My savings. My life." "You've been hiding it?" "I've been protecting it." "From me?" I finally looked at him. "Yes." He didn't speak again that night. The next morning, he made breakfast. Eggs, toast, tea, everything I used to make when we were newly married. I didn't touch a bite. Not because I was angry. Because I no longer wanted to pretend. He watched me from across the table, his eyes hollow with something that might have been guilt. Or fear. Or maybe just confusion. I'm not the enemy, Shiyun, he said softly. You're not the victim either, I replied. He lowered his head. Later that week, his parents came to visit. I wasn't surprised. I had seen it before. His mother pulled me aside while the men sat in the living room sipping tea. You've been distant, she said. It's not good for a marriage. I've been clear, I said. That's not what marriage is about. Then maybe I'm not the right kind of wife. She sighed heavily. You always were too smart for your own good. And David wasn't smart enough to realize it. She didn't like that. But she didn't argue. Instead, she changed tactics. That boy, he's grown so much. He's doing well in school. Kind-hearted. Obedient. I waited. You should be proud. I didn't create him, I said. I'm just cleaning up the mess that made him. You're cruel, she hissed. No, I said calmly. I'm honest. It just sounds cruel when you're used to lies. She stood there for a long moment, then walked away. I watched her go. I wasn't angry. Just tired. Tired of the same games. The same scripts. The same attempts to make me feel guilty for choosing myself. That night, I updated my will again. This time, I removed David entirely. No caveats. No exceptions. Mason would get something if, and only if, he chose to face the truth when he was older. If he came to me not as a son, but as a human being seeking honesty. Otherwise, the money would go to a foundation I had set up in secret for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. Like I had. One evening, as I walked home from work, I passed a street musician playing a violin under the glow of a flickering lamp. The melody was sad. Ancient. Familiar. It brought tears to my eyes, not because of what it sounded like, but because of what it reminded me of. A time when I still believed people were good. That love could fix anything. That marriage was sacred. I kept walking. By the time I got home, the feeling had passed. Mason was waiting at the door again. I drew something for you, he said, holding up a crayon sketch. Me and him, holding hands. Big smiles. A sun in the corner. The word mom scribbled at the top. It broke me. Not because of what it was, but because I knew it wouldn't last. One day, he'd learn the truth. And the smile in that drawing would disappear forever. By autumn, the walls in our home began to whisper. Not with sound, but with weight. The air had changed. Even silence carried tension now, like every object in the house had become a quiet witness to something wrong. Something unraveling. David had started to linger longer at work. Or so he said. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Because the truth was always just beneath the surface, hiding behind the polite smiles and careful distance. A truth we both recognized, but neither had the courage to speak aloud. We were no longer husband and wife. We were cohabitants in a house full of history. One evening, Mason brought home a school project. Family tree. A classic. A cruel joke, really. He placed the half-filled chart on the table, looking up at me with hesitant eyes. Can you help me? He asked. I froze. There it was, the fork in the road. Again. The moment where I could lie and keep the story clean, or tell the truth and watch the illusion burn. I sat down beside him. Let's start with you, I said. We wrote his name at the base. Now your father. He wrote David's name without hesitation. Then paused. Mom? I looked at the pencil in his hand. The empty line on the page. My mouth felt dry. You can write mine, I said softly. His eyes brightened. But I wasn't done. Just remember something, Mason. Family trees don't always tell the full story. He tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean sometimes roots grow in strange places. Sometimes love is more real than biology. And sometimes the people who raise us aren't the ones who made us. He didn't understand. Not fully. But he nodded anyway. And filled in the blank space beside mother with my name. It felt like a small victory, and a future betrayal waiting to happen. That night, I stared at the chart long after he went to bed, wondering how long the truth could hide behind a child's hope. The next day, I began searching. Not just for more real estate or financial leverage, I'd already built enough of that, but for her. The woman David had lied for. The woman who had birthed the child I raised. I needed to see her. Not out of jealousy. Out of strategy. I found her through an old address I remembered from the previous life. A tiny apartment complex on the edge of the city. The kind that smelled of burnt oil and old paint. Her name was still Meiwa. Same face. Same forced sweetness. I didn't speak to her. Not yet. I just watched. She was alone now. No husband. No children in sight. Good. Let her feel what I had once felt, the ache of doing everything for someone who wouldn't claim you. A week later, David came home early. He was holding a wrapped box. For you, he said. I raised an eyebrow. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just thought of you. I unwrapped it slowly. A scarf. Pale lavender. Cashmere. Pretty. Useless. I folded it neatly and set it on the table. You think this fixes something? He sighed. It's not about fixing. It's about remembering who we were. I looked at him, tired. Do you even remember who I am now? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. David had lived so long inside his lie that the truth no longer made sense to him. He wanted the version of me that cried quietly, forgave easily, and carried everyone's burdens like duty. But that version was gone. And no scarf could bring her back. Later that night, I checked Mason's backpack. It wasn't a habit, just instinct. Inside was a letter. Folded twice. No stamp. No address. Just a short note written in looping handwriting. He doesn't know yet. But he will. Soon. No signature. My hands went cold. Who wrote it? Why was it in his backpack? Did David know? Had she reached out? The next day, I followed Mason to school. Not closely. Just enough to see where he went. Who he spoke to. If someone was watching him. I saw nothing suspicious. But the letter stayed with me. Like a thorn under skin. When Mason came home, I asked about it. Where did you get this? He looked surprised. It was in my locker. I thought it was part of a game. I didn't open it. You didn't read it? No, I believed him. He was still too young for secrets. But not for long. I burned the note in the kitchen sink. Watched the paper curl and blacken, the words disappearing into ash. But the message was already seared into my mind. He doesn't know yet. But he will. Soon. It was a warning. Or a promise. Either way, I knew what it meant. Time was running out. Someone, maybe her, maybe David, was planning to tell Mason the truth. I had built a world from the ashes of betrayal. Carefully. Patiently. Piece by piece. But even the strongest houses collapse if termites get in. And now they had. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to tell him, fine. But I would get there first. Truth is like fire. You can try to contain it, hide it under blankets of silence, but eventually it burns through everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the window, listening to the quiet rhythm of the ceiling fan and the ticking of the old clock David's mother gave us as a wedding gift. I used to think silence meant peace. Now I know it's the sound of a lie that hasn't been spoken yet. Mason was still innocent. Still calling me mom with that bright-eyed faith that made my chest ache. But I could feel the countdown ticking beneath the surface. Soon, someone would tell him that I wasn't his real mother. That David had lied. That the woman who birthed him, the one he didn't even remember, was still alive. And worse? That I knew all along. I couldn't let him hear it from anyone else. So I decided he would hear it from me. But how do you tell a child that the life he knows is built on omission? That the woman who tucked him in every night, who taught him to tie his shoes, who bandaged every scraped knee isn't really his mother? I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I waited until David left for work. I made breakfast like usual: toast, eggs, warm milk. Mason sat across from me in his school uniform, swinging his legs under the chair like he always did. Hey, I said softly. Can we talk after school today? Just you and me. He looked up, curious. Am I in trouble? No, I said quickly. Not at all. I want to tell you a story. He smiled. I love stories. But this wasn't the kind you love. When he got home that afternoon, I took him to the park, the old one near the canal, where the trees bent just slightly from age and wind. We sat on a bench, away from the swings and noise, under a sky heavy with clouds. "I want to tell you something important," I said. He nodded. "Do you know how you came to live with us?" He thought for a moment. "Daddy said I came from far away. That your cousin, someone couldn't take care of me." I took a deep breath. "That's not the whole story." He turned to me, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" I stared straight ahead. I couldn't look at him just yet. "When you were a baby, someone else gave birth to you." "Not me. Another woman." He said nothing. "That woman, she couldn't raise you. For many reasons. So Daddy brought you home. And I became your mother in every other way." He was silent for a long time. I could hear the wind rustling the leaves above us. A dog barking in the distance. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he whispered. "Because I was scared." He turned to me. "Of what?" "Of losing you. Of you hating me. Of you going to find her one day and forgetting me." His voice cracked. "I would never." I finally looked at him. Tears were gathering in his eyes, not from betrayal, but from confusion and fear. I reached out and took his hand. "I'm still your mom, Mason. I always will be. I fed you, held you, sang you to sleep. No one can take those things away." "But why did Daddy lie?" I didn't answer that. Because I didn't want to poison him against his father. "Not yet." "I don't know," I said. "But I promised myself I'd never lie to you again. That's why I'm telling you now. Before someone else does." He nodded slowly, then leaned into me and cried. Quiet, body-shaking sobs that felt too big for someone so small. I held him. And for the first time in this second life, I cried too. Not out of pain, but out of release. Because finally, the weight of silence had lifted. We stayed like that for a long time, until the sky dimmed and the streetlights began to flicker on. When we walked home, he didn't say much. But as we reached the front door, he looked up at me and said, "You're my real mom. I don't care about the other stuff." And in that moment, I believed him. But I also knew what was coming. Because the truth doesn't end with one conversation. It spreads. Like fire. That night, David noticed something had changed. He watched Mason hug me tighter than usual. Saw the way we spoke in low tones. The way our eyes met, without guilt for once. "What's going on?" he asked casually. "Nothing," I said. "Just a talk." David narrowed his eyes. He knew. He just didn't know what we'd said, or how far we'd gone. But it made him nervous. I saw it. And I liked it. The next morning, he left early. By noon, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected, Maywa. Her voice was brittle, uncertain. "Can we meet?" I paused. "Why no?" "Because I heard that Mason knows." So she was part of it. The note. The whispers. I told him, I said flatly. "Not you. Not David. Me." A long silence. Then, "I just want to see him. Once." "No, you don't get to decide. Yes, I do. I'm the one who raised him. I'm the one he runs to when he has nightmares. I'm the one who stayed." Her voice broke. "I'm his mother." "No," I said. "You're just the woman who left him behind." "I'm the one who stayed." She hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, heart racing, not from anger. From adrenaline. Because I had faced the source. And I didn't flinch. That night, Mason fell asleep beside me on the couch, a rare thing now that he was older. But tonight, he needed to feel safe. And I needed to remember why I was doing all of this. Not for revenge. For protection. For truth. For the kind of love that doesn't need biology to be real. The kind that survives fire and still chooses to stay. There's a moment, right after you tell the truth, where everything goes silent. Not because things are calm, but because the storm is waiting. David came home late again. But this time, I was waiting. I sat at the dining table with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The house was dark except for the dim kitchen light behind me. I heard his key in the lock, the soft gingle, the door creaking open. He paused when he saw me. "You're up." I had something on my mind. He walked in slowly, setting down his bag. His eyes scanned the room, calculating. He could feel the change. "What is it?" I told him, I said. His face didn't move at first. Then a slow blink. Told who what? Mason. I told him the truth. David's jaw flexed. You had no right. I laughed. Quiet. Cold. No right? I'm the only one who ever had the right. He stepped closer. You didn't think I should be part of that conversation? You weren't part of the pain, David. You don't get to control the healing. He stood there, breathing hard. Not from exhaustion. From fear. Anger. Maybe both. Do you realize what you've done? He snapped. I told a boy the truth about his life. Something you never had the courage to do. He paced away from me, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand, no, I said sharply, standing now. You don't understand. You think you can just patch holes with gifts and half-truths. You think silence is protection. But it's not. It's poison. He looked at me then, truly looked, and I saw it in his eyes, regret. But not the kind that changes a man. The kind that curses him for getting caught. What if she shows up? He asked quietly. She already did. He froze. When? A few days ago. She called. She wanted to see him. And? I said no. Good, he whispered. But not for you, I added. For him. He nodded once, then turned away. We didn't speak again that night. The next morning, I checked Mason's backpack again, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust the world around him. No letters. Just books, homework, a crumpled juice box. But I could feel the pressure building. In the air. In David. In the silence between us. That week, David began acting strange. Attentive. Present. He made breakfast. Cleaned the gutters. Offered to help Mason with schoolwork. He even suggested we take a weekend trip as a family. Guilt can make a man look holy. But I knew better. This wasn't redemption. It was distraction. And I wasn't falling for it. I continued my work with Maylin's real estate team, small properties, manageable tenants, steady cash flow. My second apartment was nearly ready. I began furnishing it in secret. Light furniture. Neutral colors. A small desk near the window. A space that didn't carry ghosts. I didn't know when I'd need it. But I knew the day was coming. Mason began asking more questions. About his birth mother. About the past. About why I looked sad sometimes when I thought he wasn't watching. I told him pieces. Never all. Just enough to keep him grounded in truth without letting it crush him. He was strong. But he was still a boy. One night, I asked him, do you ever wonder what she's like? The woman who gave birth to you. He was quiet. I used to, he said. But not anymore. Why not? Because I already have a mom. Why would I need to? I smiled. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. People like her, like David, they don't give up control easily. And I was taking it back, piece by piece. That weekend, I received a letter in the mail. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a photo. Mason. At school. On the swings. Smiling. Taken from a distance. My hands went cold. I turned the photo over. A single sentence written in ink. He has her eyes. No name. No threat. But I didn't need one. It was her. She was watching. And now she wanted to be seen. I showed the photo to no one. Not David. Not the school. Not even Mason. Instead, I made a choice. I visited her. Unannounced. Her building was older than I remembered. Faded walls. Rusted gate. The kind of place where no one asks questions and everyone minds their own business. She answered the door barefoot, wearing a loose t-shirt and old jeans. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised. I figured you'd come. Why the letter? She stepped aside. Come in. I hesitated. Then entered. The apartment was sparse. Clean, but cold. No pictures. No signs of a child's past. Just blank walls and a single plant on the windowsill. You're watching him, I said. She poured tea. Didn't offer me any. I wanted to see how he's doing. You gave that right up. I gave birth to him. And then you walked away. She looked at me then, eyes sharp. Don't pretend you understand. You never had to choose between shame and survival. I stayed silent. Because as much as I hated her, she wasn't wrong. I didn't know her full story. But I knew mine. You don't get to come back now, I said. You don't get to haunt his life just because guilt finally caught up. She sat down. I'm not here to take him. Good. Because I won't let you. She stared at me, then nodded. You love him? Yes. More than anything? More than anything I've ever hated, I said. She leaned back. That's a powerful kind of love. It has to be, I replied. Because the damage you left behind was just as powerful. She looked away. I stood. This is your last visit. Your last letter. Your last photo. If I see you near him again, I won't be quiet next time. Her eyes flashed. Is that a threat? No, I said. It's a promise. And I left. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just walked out with my spine straight, my heart steady, and my future finally mine. When I got home, Mason ran to the door, threw his arms around me. You were gone a long time. I had something to take care of, I said, kneeling to his height. Something important? The most important. He smiled. And I knew I'd made the right decision. Sometimes love is loud, fireworks, confessions, poetry. And sometimes it's silent. A hand on the back. A look across the room. A choice to stay. This time I chose him. And I wasn't afraid anymore. After my visit to her apartment, something changed inside me. It wasn't peace, not yet. It was sharper. Cleaner. A kind of cold clarity that only comes when you finally see your enemy without the mask. No more guessing. No more wondering. Now I knew what I was dealing with. And I knew what I had to protect. David noticed it too. He came home one evening to find I had rearranged the living room, moved his armchair, changed the photos on the shelf, cleared out the drawer where he kept receipts and spare keys. What's going on? He asked. Fresh start, I said. His smile was tight. Are we starting something or ending something? Sometimes they're the same thing, I said without looking up. He didn't press further. But from that moment on, I knew he was watching me again. Not out of curiosity, out of fear. Mason, on the other hand, had grown quieter since our talk. Not withdrawn, just thoughtful. He asked fewer questions now, but they carried more weight. Do you think she's still out there? He asked one afternoon while I was folding laundry. She is, I said simply. Do you think she wants me? I sat down beside him. She might want the idea of you, I said. The version she could have had before life got hard. But not me. I don't know. But I know I want you. Every day. Even the hard ones. He leaned into me. You don't wish you had your own kids instead? I looked at him, this boy with my heart but not my blood. No, I said softly. You're mine. In every way that matters. He didn't respond. He just held my hand tighter. That night, I found a second letter. This one tucked into my mailbox, no envelope. Just a folded piece of paper with 4 words written in blue ink. He's asking questions now. No name. No punctuation. No subtlety. She was escalating. She wanted me to know that she was close, not just physically, but psychologically. That she knew what Mason was thinking. That she was inside our home without ever stepping foot in it. I didn't burn this letter. I filed it. Labeled it. Kept it in a folder marked control. Because that's what this was now, a war of control. And I wouldn't lose again. I hired a private investigator the next day. A quiet man named Elliot who specialized in containment cases. No violence. No police. Just information and leverage. He reviewed the letters. The photo. The history. She's testing boundaries, he said after our second meeting. Not trying to win. Just trying to make you react. She's watching him. She's watching you watching him, he corrected. She won't stop. Then we don't let her think she's invisible. We set up subtle security. Cameras hidden in planters. Motion sensors near the mailbox. Background checks on her apartment, her job, if she had one, and her recent contacts. Within a week, Elliot confirmed that she'd been talking to someone from David's side of the family. A cousin. Female. Someone I never trusted. They'd been exchanging messages through a secondary number. She's building a support system, Elliot explained. Not custody-related, not yet. But emotional. She wants to seem reformed. Like she's worthy of a second chance. Not with my child, I said. He nodded. Then we make sure no one believes her story more than yours. That meant documentation. It meant gathering everything: texts, emails, school records, financial history, photos of Mason's upbringing. Not to fight a custody battle, but to win the narrative before it started. Because if she came for him again, she'd be walking into a fortress, not a broken house. Meanwhile, David was slipping. I could feel it. His guilt made him volatile. Sometimes soft. Sometimes defensive. Once, he even accused me of turning Mason against him. I didn't have to, I said. You did that all by yourself. You think I'm the villain in this story. You are the story. What does that mean? It means none of this would have happened if you'd just told the truth the first time. He stared at me stunned. But I wasn't finished. You cheated. You lied. You brought home a child without warning. And then you expected me to mother him while pretending nothing had changed. You buried the truth so deep you forgot where you left it. He opened his mouth to argue. I held up a hand. And now that I'm protecting myself, protecting him, you're scared. Not because I'm wrong, but because I'm no longer weak. He didn't speak to me for 3 days after that. But that was fine. I wasn't speaking to him either. Mason was the only reason I stayed in that house. The only reason I breathed through the dust of old betrayal. But I knew that wouldn't last. Soon, I'd need to move him. Not as punishment. As protection. I visited the second apartment that weekend. The keys felt strange in my hand, not heavy, but full of quiet possibility. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains. The floors were clean. The walls freshly painted. This wasn't escape. It was strategy. I stood in the center of the room, imagining Mason sitting at the small table, eating cereal before school. I imagined laughter in the hallway. Homework spread across the rug. A new routine. A new peace. And I smiled. Not because it was perfect. Because it was mine. Later that week, I asked Mason a simple question. If you had to live somewhere else, just for a little while, just us two, would you be okay with that? He looked up, curious. Why? Just to see what it's like. A little adventure. No reason. He thought for a moment. Only if I get to bring my book collection. Deal. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. But he trusted me. And for now, that was enough. When we got home that evening, David was waiting. He had found the second letter. You lied to me, he said, holding it up. No, I said. I withheld. That's the same thing. No, I said calmly. Yours was a lie. Mine is strategy. She's escalating. You should have told me. And done what, David? Let you handle it like last time? Let you lie again, cover it up, pretend it would go away. He clenched his jaw. I'm not the same man I was back then. Good, I said. Because I'm not the same woman. I took the letter from his hand and walked past him. No more pleading. No more waiting. This time, I would write the ending myself. Sometimes I wonder if people ever truly change. David swore he wasn't the man he used to be. He said it one evening while washing the dishes, his voice low but urgent, as if confessing to the sink. I've learned my lesson, he said. I know I hurt you. I know I can't undo it. But I want to do better. I didn't look up from my tea. Do better for who? I asked. For me? Or for yourself? He didn't answer. Because he knew the truth. He wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save the version of himself he wanted me to see, the man who wasn't a liar, wasn't a coward, wasn't the kind of person who could bring a child into our home without telling me the truth. But that version of him never existed. And I was done pretending. The following week, Mason and I began spending more time at the second apartment. I told him it was our secret adventure home, a place just for us. His eyes lit up when I gave him a key. Can I decorate my room? He asked. Yes, I said. Any way you want. He smiled so wide I almost forgot the reason we were here in the first place. We spent the next few evenings buying small things, bright curtains, a rug with planets and stars, a bookshelf for his growing collection. I watched him arrange his books in careful order, humming to himself. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. But peace is fragile. And I knew it wouldn't last. David found out about the apartment 3 days later. He came home with a storm in his eyes, slamming the door so hard that Mason flinched. What the hell is this? He demanded, throwing a set of keys onto the table. "I found them in your bag." I didn't flinch. "It's where I go when I need space," I said. "Space? From what?" "From us. From the lie we live in." He stood there, jaw tight, chest rising and falling. "You can't just take my son and run." "He's my son," I said sharply. "I'm the one who raised him." "You think blood makes a father? Then you're even more of a fool than I thought." His eyes darkened. "You're trying to turn him against me." "No," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You did that yourself." He looked like he might explode. But then, something broke in his face. A flicker of fear. Maybe even desperation. "What do you want from me, Shiyun?" he asked. His voice was quieter now, but not soft. More like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. "I don't want anything," I said. "Not anymore." I turned and walked away. That night, Mason sensed the tension. "Is Daddy mad at you?" he asked as I tucked him into bed. "No," I said gently. "Daddy's mad at himself. He just doesn't know it yet." Did I do something wrong? I looked at him, this boy who didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of a war he didn't start. "No," I said, brushing his hair back. "You're the only thing that's right." He smiled faintly, but I could see the worry in his eyes. The next day, I received another letter. This one was worse. It wasn't just words. It was a photograph. Me and Mason. At the new apartment. Taken through the window. On the back, in the same looping handwriting, were 5 words: "He deserves to know everything." I felt my breath catch. Not out of fear, but out of rage. She was crossing every line now. Not just watching, but intruding. Creeping into the one safe place I had built. I called Elliot. "I need this to end," I said. "Whatever it takes." He came over that evening, his expression grim. "She's escalating. This isn't just guilt anymore. It's obsession." "Then stop her," I said. He nodded. "I'll handle it. But you need to be careful. She's not thinking straight. And people like that, they can do unpredictable things." That night, I sat by Mason's bed as he slept. The soft rise and fall of his breath was the only sound in the room. His small hand rested near mine, warm and trusting. And I realized something. This wasn't just about keeping him safe. It was about keeping myself whole. Because without him, I didn't know if I'd survive the second betrayal. The next morning, David tried to apologize. He brought flowers. Lilies. My favorite. "I know I've been a mess," he said. "I don't want us to end like this." I stared at the bouquet. The bright white petals looked like small, hollow apologies. "We ended a long time ago, David," I said. His eyes searched mine. "Do you love him?" I frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "Mason. Do you love him like your own?" I felt my throat tighten. "Yes," I said. "More than I ever thought I could." "Then why are you pulling away?" "Because love isn't enough when the foundation is built on lies." That night, Mason asked a new question. "Do I have to choose?" "Choose what?" "Between you and Daddy. If something happens." The words nearly broke me. "You don't have to choose," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll always be here. No matter what." "But what if someone else says I'm theirs too?" My heart stopped. She had spoken to him. "Who told you that?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "A lady. At school. She said she knew me when I was a baby." I felt fire rise in my chest. She had crossed the line again. This wasn't just intrusion. This was war. You can prepare for a confrontation. You can rehearse what you'll say, steady your breath, even practice your silences. But when the moment finally arrives, when truth enters the room wearing the faces of people you once loved, there's no script. Only instinct. Only fire. It happened on a Tuesday. I picked Mason up from school early. No reason. Just an uneasy feeling in my chest I couldn't shake. He didn't ask questions, just smiled when he saw me at the gate and ran into my arms like he always did. As we were walking toward the car, I saw her. Standing across the street. Meiwa. Dressed in a soft cream coat, hair tied back neatly, no trace of the woman I remembered. She didn't move. Didn't wave. Just watched us. Like she was memorizing the shape of our life. I turned away, shielding Mason slightly with my body. We drove home in silence. I told him to get started on homework while I made tea. My hands were shaking as I boiled the water. Then the knock came. 3 soft taps. Measured. Deliberate. I opened the door. David stood there. And beside him, her. "Can we come in?" he asked. "No," I said. He sighed. "Please." I said no. Mason peeked around the corner. "Daddy?" "Go back to your room, sweetheart," I said. "We're just talking." He hesitated. David smiled. "Hey, bud, now," I said, my voice like ice. Mason retreated. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. "What is this?" I asked, folding my arms. David looked exhausted. "She wants to talk." "No, I just want a few minutes," Maywa said softly. Her voice had changed. Less breathy, more measured. "Practiced." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied. "But I have something to say to you," she said. And to him. "You've had years." I wasn't ready then. "And you think I care now?" David stepped between us. "This doesn't have to be a war." I laughed. Bitter. "You think this isn't a war already? You brought the enemy to my doorstep." Maywa's eyes flashed. "I'm not your enemy." "No," I said, stepping forward. "You snuck letters into my son's backpack. You sent photographs. Watched his school like a ghost. And now you show up here with him, like you deserve a seat at the table." Her lips trembled. But her voice stayed even. "I'm his mother." "No," I said. "You're his birth mother. That's biology. That's history. I'm his present. I'm his heartbeat." "I made mistakes." "No," I snapped. "You abandoned him. You let another woman raise your child because it was easier than being uncomfortable. And now that he's growing into someone worth knowing, you want to swoop in and call it love." Silence. David ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't helping," he muttered. "You don't get to mediate this," I said to him. "You're the reason we're here." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For lying? For hiding her? For giving me a child without telling me where he came from. All of it." "Too late," I whispered. Then I looked back at Maywa. "What do you want?" She hesitated. "A chance. To see him. To explain." "No, I'm not asking to take him." "Because you can't," I said coldly. "I just want." "You want to be forgiven," I interrupted. "You want to feel like you're still part of something pure. But you gave that up. You can't rewrite what's already carved into the stone." She swallowed hard. "He should get to choose." I stepped closer. "He's a child. He doesn't get to carry your shame. He doesn't get to be a redemption arc." "I just need one moment," she whispered. "Just a chance to say what I couldn't say before." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time I saw it. Not malice. Not pride. Just sorrow. Raw, aching sorrow. It didn't change my decision. But it changed my tone. "You don't get a moment," I said. "But I'll give you this, I won't erase you. One day, when he's old enough, if he wants to meet you, I won't stop it. But that moment will be on his terms. Not yours." Tears spilled from her eyes. She nodded. David looked between us, unsure of his place. "You should go," I said. And this time, they listened. I stood on the porch long after they left. The wind had picked up. Leaves scattered across the pavement like forgotten promises. Inside, Mason was sitting on the couch. "Was that her?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Did she want to see me?" "Yes." "Why didn't she?" "Because I said no." He was quiet for a moment. "Will I ever meet her?" "Maybe," I said. "When you're ready. When you want to. But not until then." "Okay." He reached for my hand. I sat beside him and pulled him close. And together, we watched the sun sink low behind the rooftops. That night, I opened a drawer in my bedroom and pulled out the folder. The one labeled control. Inside it were the letters, the photos, the notes. I flipped through them slowly, one by one. And then I did what I should have done months ago. I locked them in a box, sealed it, and placed it at the very back of the closet. Not to forget, but to finish. Some stories don't need to be read twice. Some ghosts only leave when you stop letting them in. The aftermath of a storm is always the quietest. Not because everything is fixed, but because the wreckage has finally stopped moving. For the first time in months, I could breathe without flinching. There were no more anonymous letters. No more photos. No knocks at the door in the dead of night. Just silence. Real silence. And within that silence, a new life started to grow. Mason adjusted to our two-home rhythm with surprising ease. He began calling the second apartment our hideout. He decorated his little room with glow-in-the-dark stars, a beanbag chair, and a corkboard where he pinned silly comics and notes I'd written him. "Do you like it here?" I asked him one evening. He nodded. "It's calm." I smiled. "Yeah, it is." Then he added, "It feels like it's just ours. Like nobody can ruin it." And just like that, I realized something. He didn't need a perfect life. He needed a safe one. One where truth was spoken. Where apologies didn't come with strings. Where love wasn't measured in blood, but in presence. That I could give him. That I would build. David didn't come by for a while after the confrontation. I didn't chase him. I didn't call. Eventually, he texted. "I know I broke everything. But if you ever want to talk, I'm still here." I read it once. Then I archived it. Closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes, the silence is the answer. Maywa never reached out again. Elliot confirmed she'd taken a leave of absence from her job. The cousin who had been feeding her updates had gone quiet too. It was as if the entire web had finally collapsed under the weight of its own desperation. I thought I'd feel triumphant. But mostly I felt, still. Peace isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just a morning where no one's watching you. A day where your child laughs without hesitation. A night where you sleep without checking the locks twice. That kind of peace is rare. And I cherished it. One Sunday afternoon, Mason and I sat by the window as rain traced lazy paths down the glass. He was reading a book about space. I was sorting old receipts. Ordinary things. Quiet things. He looked up and said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think people can have more than one beginning." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Yeah. Like, if something really big happens, and then your life changes, that can be a new beginning. Like in books." I set down the papers. "That's very wise of you," I said. He shrugged. "I've had a few beginnings already." "So have I." He smiled, then asked, "What was your favorite one?" I looked at him. "You," I said. I began writing again. Just little things. Notes. Letters I never sent. A journal I kept hidden in the top drawer of the nightstand. Some entries were soft. "Today Mason tried to make pancakes and burned half the batch. But he laughed so hard at his mess, I forgot to care about the cleanup." Some were not. "I still wake up expecting a knock on the door." Trauma is a house guest that overstays. But most of them were healing. Because writing wasn't about reliving. It was about reclaiming. One evening, Mason asked if we could visit the park again, the old one by the canal, where I'd first told him the truth. I hesitated, then agreed. We sat on the same bench. The trees still leaned in that old familiar way. The wind smelled like early spring and distant rain. "This place feels different now," he said. "How so?" "Before, I felt scared here. Now, I don't." "That's good," I said. "It's because you told me the truth." I felt my chest ache. "Do you ever think about her?" He nodded. "Sometimes." "What do you think?" He paused. "That she was probably really sad to let me go." I nodded slowly. "She was." He looked at me. "But I'm not sad. Because I ended up with you." And in that moment, I felt something wash over me, not pride. Not relief. Gratitude. Gratitude for the chaos. The confrontation. The bruises truth had left behind. Because they had led me here. To this boy. To this bench. To this life that wasn't perfect, but was finally mine. When we got home that night, I hung a new frame in the hallway. A photo of Mason, arms wide in a field of yellow flowers, grinning with abandon. Below it, I added a single word. Beginnings. Healing is rarely loud. There's no dramatic music. No spotlight. No perfect timing. It's the quiet decision to make dinner even when your appetite is gone. It's brushing your child's hair even when your hands are trembling from the day. It's choosing to stay soft even after life tried to harden you. I was beginning to heal. Not because everything was okay, but because I was okay anyway. Mason had started calling our second apartment home more often than not. It wasn't intentional. It just slipped out during small moments, like when he said, "I left my sketchbook at home," referring to our hideout instead of the house with David. I didn't correct him, because he was right. This was home now. A space free from secrets, free from shadows, free from the weight of pretending. He'd also started drawing more. Not just cartoons or spaceships, but people, scenes, emotion. One afternoon, I found a sketch on his desk. It showed a boy standing on a cliff with the ocean roaring below, and a woman beside him, holding his hand as the wind blew around them. "What's this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Us. You and me. After the storm." I didn't ask how he knew. Children always know. Even when we try to shield them, they feel everything. But Mason had turned that pain into art, just like I was learning to turn mine into peace. I started volunteering on weekends at a youth center in the neighborhood. It wasn't a huge commitment, just mentoring, helping with homework, sharing my story in pieces. Not the whole version, just the parts that could help someone else breathe easier. One of the girls, Layla, reminded me of myself at 16, quiet, observant, and a little too wise for her age. One day she asked, "Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved?" I looked her in the eye. "Yes," I said. "Did it hurt?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" I smiled gently. "No, because I found someone else worth walking toward." She nodded slowly, as if filing that away for later. And I realized I wasn't just healing myself anymore. I was becoming someone else's lighthouse. David sent a letter a few days later. Not a text. Not an email. A real letter. It was 6 pages long. He apologized. He explained. He cried in ink. He said he'd never stop regretting what he did, the deception, the weakness, the fear. He said he was working with a therapist. That he was trying to become someone Mason could respect. He didn't ask me to come back. He didn't try to blame me. He just asked for one thing. "Please don't let Mason forget me. Even if I fade from your life." I didn't know what to do with the letter. So I placed it in a drawer. Not because I forgave him, but because some wounds don't bleed forever. Eventually, they just become scars. And scars don't need to be reopened to be remembered. That night, I made Mason's favorite dinner, fried rice with extra egg and too much soy sauce. He danced in the kitchen as I cooked, barefoot, humming some pop song I didn't recognize. "How was school?" I asked. "Boring," he grinned. "Make any trouble?" "Always." I ruffled his hair and he laughed. It was so normal. So blissfully, achingly normal. And I realized how much I had craved this. Not fireworks, not apologies, not vindication. Just this. A quiet kitchen. A hungry boy. A safe home. Later, as I folded laundry on the couch, Mason crawled under the blanket beside me. "Mom?" "Yeah. Do you think bad people know they're bad?" I paused. "Sometimes. But sometimes they think they're doing what's right, even when it hurts people." He thought for a while. "Was she bad?" "You mean, her?" He nodded. "She made bad choices," I said carefully. "But I don't think she's bad." "Do you hate her?" I looked at him. "No. I used to. But not anymore." "Why not?" "Because if I kept hating her, it would have eaten me alive." "Is that why you're happy now?" I smiled softly. "I'm not happy all the time. But I'm free. And that's better." He nodded slowly. "Can I draw that?" "Draw what?" "Freedom." My chest tightened. "Yeah, baby. Draw that." At the youth center the following weekend, Layla showed me one of her poems. It ended with the line, "I am not the things they did to me. I am the things I survived." I asked her if I could write it on the wall of the center. She nodded. So I did. In big, looping paint strokes, yellow, like sunrise. And beneath it, I added my own line, "And the child I raised will never carry my pain. Only my strength." It started with a simple question over breakfast. "Do I look like her?" Mason wasn't looking at me when he said it. He was staring into his bowl, spoon clinking softly against ceramic. My heart skipped. He didn't need to explain who her was. I put down my coffee slowly. "What makes you ask that?" He shrugged, still not looking at me. "People at school say I don't look like you. Or Dad." I took a breath. The truth always carries weight, but when spoken gently, it doesn't crush. You do look like her, I said softly. But you also look like you. Like someone becoming exactly who he's meant to be. He finally looked at me. Is that bad? No, I said. It's beautiful. He didn't ask more after that. But he didn't need to. Because sometimes children ask one question to test if the truth is safe, not because they want the answer, but because they want to know you won't lie. That morning, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. He was getting older. More curious. More aware. And soon, he'd ask more questions, bigger ones. Not just about who she was, but why she left. Why I stayed. Why he belonged to two people and yet didn't feel like he fit anywhere. And I would have to be ready. That weekend, I brought him to the lake near the edge of the city. The one I used to visit as a girl when life felt too loud. The water was glassy, and the air smelled like pine and cold wind. We sat on a picnic blanket in silence. He skipped stones. I watched the ripples. Then, slowly, I pulled a small envelope from my bag. "What's that?" he asked. "A letter. From her. The last one she sent. I wasn't going to show it to you. But I think you're ready." His hands trembled as he took it. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning line by line. When he finished, he sat very still. "What do you think?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She said she loved me. But then she left." How does that make sense? I looked at the lake, then back at him. Some people love in broken ways, I said. They don't know how to stay. They think love is enough without showing up for it. Is she still broken? Maybe, I said. But you're not. And that's what matters. He nodded, folding the letter neatly and placing it in his lap. Can I write her one? My heart stopped, not from fear, but from the courage in his voice. Yes, I said. You can write whatever you want. That night he did. It was short, but it was powerful. Hi. I hope you're okay. I don't hate you. But I'm okay now. I have someone who stayed. And I hope someday you have that too. Mason. I didn't read it until he asked me to mail it. And when I did, I cried. Not because it hurt, but because healing doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like a child choosing grace. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in Mason. He asked fewer questions, but his hugs lingered longer. He started smiling in his sleep again. He began signing his school papers with both his names first and last, like he was finally making peace with all the pieces of himself. And one night, while brushing his teeth, he looked at me and said, "I don't feel lost anymore." I nearly dropped the glass in my hand. "Why's that?" I asked. "Because I know where home is now." I knelt down and cupped his face in my hands. "Where is it?" He grinned. "Wherever you are." At the youth center, Layla read another poem aloud during our weekly writing group. This one ended with, "I am not here to prove I'm whole. I'm here to live like the pieces made something beautiful." I clapped the longest. Because that poem wasn't just hers. It was mine. And it was Mason's. David called the next weekend. He didn't ask for anything. Just wanted to let me know he'd moved into a smaller place and was picking up extra shifts. "I'm trying," he said. "I know I messed up. But I'm still trying." "I know," I replied. There was silence. Then he said, "Thank you for not turning Mason against me." "I didn't need to," I said. "You both have to find your own peace." "You think he will?" "I think he already has." Another pause. "Will you ever forgive me?" Forgiveness is complicated. It's not a door that swings open with an apology. It's a window you crack when the air finally feels safe to breathe. "I don't hate you," I said. "And I don't carry it anymore." "That's something." "It's everything," I replied. One night, Mason asked if we could go through his old baby photos. I hesitated, not because of what he'd see, but because of what he might feel. But I agreed. We sat on the floor, flipping through albums I hadn't touched in years. He pointed to a picture of him as a toddler, sitting in my lap, both of us covered in paint and laughter. Was this our first home? No, I smiled. It was our first real home. The one we made together. He held the photo gently. "I like that one." "Me too." That evening, I started writing again. Not just journal entries. Not letters. But a book. Our story. Not for publishing. Not for the world. Just for us. Because one day, when he's older, I want him to read it, to see how far we came. To know he was never a burden. To understand that love isn't something you earn, it's something you build. Page by page. Step by step. Even when it breaks you open. Especially then. You don't realize how long you've been holding your breath until you finally exhale. That's what healing feels like. It doesn't roar in like a storm. It whispers. It tiptoes in. You notice it when you can walk past old places without your chest tightening. When you stop rehearsing conversations you'll never have. When you can say their name without tasting bitterness. That's when you know, the past no longer owns you. I didn't realize I'd arrived there until I said yes to something I never imagined. A speaking event. It started at the youth center. Layla's older sister worked for a nonprofit that supported women navigating complex family dynamics, especially single mothers, trauma survivors, and caregivers. She'd heard about the work I'd done with Layla and others. About my background, my story, the pieces of it I had shared, anyway. She emailed me with an invitation. Would you be willing to share your journey at our annual summit? Nothing fancy. Just your truth. There are people who need to hear it. At first, I stared at the message for days. Who was I to speak? Who would want to listen? I wasn't a success story. I hadn't built a business or written a memoir. I didn't have perfect closure. But then I thought of Mason. Of how he looked at me when I told him the truth. Of how he stood taller after writing his own letter to the woman who gave him away. And I realized I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be real. The event was held in a small community auditorium, nothing fancy, just foldable chairs, bottled water, and dim lights. But when I stepped onto that stage, my heart thundered like I was about to speak to the world. I looked out at a room full of faces, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, social workers, teachers, survivors. Women who had loved and lost. Women who were still bleeding. Women who were tired of being told to move on. I took a deep breath and began. I used to think forgiveness was a gift you gave other people, I said. That if someone hurt you, the noble thing was to let it go. To rise above. I paused. But what they don't tell you is this. You can't rise above something that's still crushing your chest. There were murmurs of agreement. I raised a child who wasn't mine by blood. I fed him, bathed him, taught him to walk, to read, to breathe through nightmares. And I did it while living next to a man who lied to me every day, who brought that child home without telling me who he truly belonged to. Heads nodded. I didn't forgive right away. I hated. I resented. I broke. And I buried those pieces in silence because the world says, be grateful. Be strong. Be quiet. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. But silence is not strength. Silence is fear in disguise. My voice didn't crack. It didn't need to. I had already survived the earthquake. Now I was just telling others where the aftershocks might hit. After the speech, people came up in quiet waves, some to say thank you, others to just touch my hand and nod. One woman whispered, "You said what I've never been able to admit out loud." That night, I cried in the car. Not out of sadness, but because, for the first time, I saw myself not as a survivor, but as a guide. I wasn't just healing for me anymore. I was healing for others. At home, Mason asked how the speech went. It was scary, I admitted. But good. Did they like you? I smiled. Some of them did. Did you cry? A little. He grinned. Told you. I laughed, then pulled him into a hug. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in me, a quiet evolution. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. I began receiving emails from attendees. Women who had sat in that crowd. Some wanted to talk. Others wanted to listen. A few asked if I would help them tell their own stories. So I did. We started a small writing group, all online. Just 5 women, including me. Every week, we wrote about something we thought would break us and how it didn't. One woman wrote about raising a child with special needs after her husband walked away. Another wrote about watching her sister marry the man who used to hit her. Every story was a bruise. Every voice was a scar. And every sentence was survival turned to song. One night, as I closed my laptop after a particularly raw session, Mason came into the room holding a drawing. It was of a tree roots twisted deep into the earth, but branches reaching high toward the sky. In the center, carved into the trunk, were two figures holding hands. "What's this?" I asked. "It's us," he said. "You're the tree." "Why?" "Because you never fall down." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You make me strong," he added. "No," I whispered. "You remind me why I have to be." David visited Mason that weekend. They went to the park, had ice cream, came back smelling like grass and sunshine. David and I barely spoke, just polite greetings. But before he left, he paused at the door. "Thank you," he said. I didn't ask what for. Because I already knew. That night, Mason fell asleep with his head on my lap while we watched a movie. His hair had grown longer, his features sharper. He was becoming a young man, thoughtful, brave, gentle. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to protect him from everything. Because I could see it clearly now, he was becoming strong in his own right. Not in spite of the past, but because of it. Children don't stay children forever. It's a truth every parent knows, but never quite accepts until the moment arrives. For me, it came on a Tuesday afternoon. Mason walked into the kitchen with a folded paper in his hand, his eyes nervous but hopeful. "Can you read this?" I took the sheet from him, unfolded it, and read slowly. It was an essay, his entry into a school-wide contest titled, "Who Am I?" He had titled it, "My Name Means More Than Blood." By the second paragraph, I had to stop and steady my hands. He wrote about being raised by a woman who wasn't his biological mother. About not learning the truth from TV shows or storybooks, but from whispers, glances, and truths tucked inside silence. He didn't mention Maywa by name. But he didn't need to. Instead, he wrote this: "I was born from one person, but I was built by another. The one who stayed. The one who read to me at night and held my hand when I couldn't sleep. I carry both of their DNA, one through blood, one through action. I am not confused. I am complete." By the time I reached the end, I was crying. He waited quietly. "Well?" he asked. It's perfect," I whispered. "You're not mad." I shook my head, pulling him into my arms. "You told the truth. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." He hugged me back, tightly. "I want people to know," he said into my shoulder. "Not just for me. For other kids like me." I nodded. "You have your voice now," I said. "Use it well." The essay was selected for publication in the school's newsletter. His teacher called me personally to say how moved the staff had been. One of them, a counselor, asked if Mason would consider reading it at the school's year-end assembly. I left the decision to him. He said yes. On the morning of the assembly, he dressed himself in a navy blue shirt and combed his hair 3 times. He checked his printed copy of the essay like it was a sacred scroll. I watched from the 3rd row as he took the stage. He didn't stutter. He didn't pause. He didn't fidget. He read every word like he had been carrying them in his chest for years. And when he finished, the room fell silent for a moment, the kind of silence that only follows truth. Then came the applause. Not just polite claps, but standing ovation. I watched him bow slightly, then walk off stage with his head high. He didn't look for me in the crowd. He didn't need to. He knew I was already standing for him. That evening, as we celebrated with takeout and root beer floats, there was a knock at the door. Not a loud one. Just 3 soft taps. Like before. But this time, my chest didn't tighten. I opened the door to find a familiar face, older now, more tired, but still unmistakably Maywa. She stood with a hesitant smile and no expectations. "Hi," she said. I didn't speak. "I saw the essay," she added. "A friend sent it to me." I waited. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For raising him." I nodded once. "You're welcome," I said. She looked down, eyes brimming. He's everything I hoped he'd be. He's everything he made himself to be." She looked back up at me. "You did that." I stepped outside, closed the door gently behind me. We stood face to face. No lawyers. No lies. No letters. Just 2 women who had both loved the same boy in very different ways. "I didn't come to interfere," she said. "Or to ask for time. I just needed to tell you I'm grateful. And I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long moment. I believe you, I said. She blinked in surprise. I don't forgive what you did, I added. But I believe you're sorry. I am. And that matters, I said. She exhaled slowly. Her shoulders softened. We stood in silence for a while. Then I asked, "Are you okay now?" She shook her head. "Not really. But I'm trying to be." "That's enough," I said. She nodded once more, then turned to leave. But before she did, I called out softly. "Meiwa." She turned. "He wrote a letter once. I never told you what it said." Her eyes welled. "I think you deserve to know. He said, 'I don't hate you. But I'm okay now. I have someone who stayed. And I hope someday you have that too.'" She pressed a hand to her mouth. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered. Then she walked away. And I let her go, truly go, for the very last time. Later that night, Mason found me on the balcony, staring at the stars. "Was that her?" "Yes." "Did she cry?" "A little." "Did you?" "No, good," he said. "Because we're okay." I nodded. "Yes, we are." He sat beside me, head resting on my shoulder. And we watched the sky in silence. Not searching for answers. Just grateful that we no longer needed them to move forward. The past no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a stone I had set down, quietly, without needing anyone's permission. Every morning when I looked in the mirror, I saw the same face, older, with lines etched by nights of worry and years of holding too much. But my eyes were different now. Brighter. Steadier. Because I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. 2 weeks after Mason's essay was read at the assembly, I received another invitation, this time from a regional women's conference. Word had spread about the small speech I gave at the community summit, and they wanted me to share my story on a larger stage. "Are you going to do it?" Mason asked as he stirred hot chocolate at the counter. I hesitated. "I'm thinking about it." "You should." "Why?" "Because you always tell me the truth makes you stronger when you share it," he said simply. "And maybe someone else needs it too." I smiled. Sometimes I forgot that children are the best teachers. The conference was held in a sunlit hall filled with women of all ages, college students, retired teachers, single mothers, survivors. The kind of room where silence wasn't heavy but expectant, like a collective inhale waiting to hear something real. I walked on stage in a simple navy dress, my hands not shaking this time. "I used to believe that love was enough," I began. "That if you gave enough of yourself, if you sacrificed enough, if you stayed quiet enough, things would work out." I paused, scanning the faces. "But love, without truth, is a slow kind of drowning." The room went still. I told them about raising a boy who wasn't mine by blood, how I learned that motherhood is not biology, but consistency. I told them about betrayal, not as a dramatic story, but as a quiet erosion of trust, year by year. And I told them about the moment I decided to stop being a victim of silence. "I am not here because I won," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here because I refuse to lose." When I finished, the applause was gentle, but it was real. I saw women wiping tears, some nodding like they'd just heard a story they'd been waiting for their whole lives. One woman came up after and said, "You reminded me that leaving doesn't always mean losing. Sometimes it means finding yourself." I smiled. That's exactly it. Meanwhile, Mason's world was opening too. The school newsletter had published his essay, but then a local youth arts magazine asked if he'd be willing to share it, along with some of his drawings. He agreed, though shyly. The day the magazine came out, he sat on the couch flipping through the pages, his face pink with pride. "You're an artist now," I teased. "I'm just telling stories," he said. I ruffled his hair. "Then you're doing exactly what I do." That evening, he showed me a sketch he'd been working on. It was a picture of our second apartment, the little kitchen, the soft couch, the plant by the window. But on the walls of his drawing, there were invisible hands, painted as outlines, holding up the ceiling and floor. "What are those?" I asked. "They're the people who make us strong," he said. "Even the ones we don't see." I looked at him, this boy who had lived through truths too heavy for his age, and felt something swell in my chest. "You're incredible," I whispered. He shrugged, but I could see the smile tugging at his lips. David had started calling more often, but I noticed something different this time. He didn't call to pry or to guilt me. He called to listen. Sometimes, Mason would tell him about his drawings or his favorite books, and David would just listen. No excuses. No tension. I wasn't naive enough to think he'd fully changed. But I saw glimpses of someone trying. And that was enough for me, because forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means releasing someone's power to hurt you again. One night, Mason asked me something I wasn't expecting. "Do you think I'll meet her one day?" I knew who he meant. "Do you want to?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. Not now. But someday. Just to see her face." I nodded. "Then when that day comes, I'll be right there with you." He smiled faintly. "I know." And I realized I wasn't scared of that day anymore. Because nothing could change what we'd built, not blood, not truth, not time. The following weekend, we spent the entire day in the kitchen baking cookies. Mason insisted on making his own recipe, which ended up being a strange mix of chocolate chips, marshmallows, and a sprinkle of cinnamon. "They're perfect," I told him after the first bite, even though they were a little too sweet. "Perfectly messy," he grinned. "Just like us." Later that night, as we sat on the couch watching an old animated movie, Mason rested his head on my lap and whispered, "Do you think we're done with the hard parts now?" I ran my fingers through his hair. "No," I said honestly. "Life always has hard parts. But we're stronger now. We know who we are." "And who are we?" he asked, his eyes sleepy. "We're the ones who stayed," I said softly. "And we're the ones who keep going." He smiled faintly and fell asleep. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. Not just for me, but for him. For the life we were building, brick by brick, story by story, day by day. We don't realize we're leaving footprints until we look back and see the path we've walked. For years, I was too focused on survival to look back, too busy trying not to drown in betrayal and silence. But now, as I stood at the edge of something new, I realized we had left a trail. A story. One that deserved to be told. It began with Mason's art. The local arts magazine that had published his essay contacted me again. This time, they wanted Mason to showcase his sketches in a youth gallery exhibit, an event where young artists could share their work publicly. When I told him, his eyes widened. "You mean, like, people will see my drawings? In frames?" "Yes," I said. "In frames. With your name on the wall." He looked nervous. "What if they don't like them?" I knelt down beside him. "It doesn't matter if they like them. What matters is that they'll see you. Your story. Your voice." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Okay, I'll do it." The weeks leading up to the exhibition were full of late-night sketching sessions and quiet bursts of creativity. Mason drew not just happy moments, but hard ones too. The day he found out the truth, the first time we moved into our second apartment, even the old park bench where we had our most difficult conversation. "This one's my favorite," he said one night, holding up a drawing of the two of us sitting under the tree by the lake. "Why?" "Because we're not smiling in it. But we still look, together." My throat tightened. That's because we were. We always are. While Mason was preparing for his art debut, I received an unexpected email. A small publishing house had read my speech transcript from the women's conference. They wanted to know if I would consider writing a short memoir, a collection of essays about resilience, motherhood, and choosing truth. My first instinct was to say no. Who was I to write a book? I wasn't a public figure. I wasn't anyone's success story. I was just me. But then I thought of Mason's essay. How brave he'd been to share his truth with an audience full of strangers. If he could do that, why couldn't I? So I said yes. At night, after Mason went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, letting the words spill out. They weren't polished. They weren't perfect. But they were mine. I wrote about the quiet pain of discovering betrayal, not the big cinematic moments, but the small cracks. The way silence settles into a house like fog. The way you learn to smile while your heart is breaking. I wrote about motherhood, how it's less about blood and more about presence. About choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave. About the boy who wasn't mine by DNA, but who had given my life more meaning than anything else ever could. And I wrote about freedom, not the kind you find by walking away, but the kind you build by staying true to yourself, even when the world tries to silence you. By the time I finished the first chapter, I was crying. Not because of the pain, but because of how far we'd come. The night of Mason's gallery exhibit, I dressed simply but neatly, my heart pounding with pride. Mason wore a crisp white shirt and jeans, his hair a little messy despite my attempts to tame it. The gallery was buzzing with people, parents, students, local artists. Mason's drawings hung along one wall, each framed with his name printed neatly below. He stood in front of his favorite piece, the one of us under the lake tree, and waited as people came to look. "Did you draw all of these yourself?" a woman asked him. "Yes," he said, voice steady. "They're beautiful," she said. "They feel honest." He smiled. I stood in the back, watching him. My boy, my artist, my truth teller. When he caught my eye, he gave me a small nod. And in that moment, I realized something. He didn't just survive the storm. He was learning to paint with its colors. After the exhibit, as we walked home with the cool evening air brushing our faces, Mason said, "Do you think she would have liked my drawings?" He didn't have to clarify who. "Yes," I said softly. "She would have. But I like them more." "Why?" "Because they're not just drawings. They're proof of who you are." He smiled, slipping his hand into mine. That night, as he slept, I opened my laptop again and started writing. But this time, the words came faster, easier. Because I wasn't writing just for me anymore. I was writing for him. For the girl I used to be. For anyone who has ever stayed silent too long. Sometimes life doesn't give you a clean ending. Sometimes it gives you a thread, and you have to weave your own ending out of the frayed pieces. And that's exactly what we were doing. Together. Closure doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like the last page of a book, quiet, inevitable, and surprisingly soft. I didn't know I was ready to face David until Mason showed me his newest drawing. It was late evening. I had just finished dinner cleanup when Mason walked into the kitchen, holding a sketch pad. "Look," he said shyly. The drawing was simple but powerful, the three of us. Mason, David, and me. We weren't standing close together, but there was no tension in the lines. Just distance. Acceptance. "Why this?" I asked. He shrugged. "Because he's still part of me. And part of you too." His words stayed with me long after he went to bed. For years, I had treated David like a ghost, a shadow of who I once loved, a man defined only by the lies he told. But Mason didn't see him that way. To Mason, David wasn't just a mistake. He was still his father. And maybe I owed it to both of them and to myself to find a way to end this chapter with something other than bitterness. I called David the next morning. "Can we meet?" I asked. There was a pause. Then, just us. Yes, just us. We met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. It wasn't a place we'd ever been before. That felt important, neutral ground, a space with no history. David looked older. Not in a way that made me pity him, but in a way that made me realize time had softened him too. His hair had more gray, his eyes less fire, more fatigue. "You look well," he said. "So do you," I replied. There was a long pause. Then I started. "I'm not here to rehash the past," I said. "We both know what happened. We both know what it cost." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup between his hands. "But I wanted you to know something," I continued. "I'm not angry anymore." His eyes flicked up in surprise. "You're not?" "No," I said. "I was for years. I let it burn me, eat me. But I've let it go. Because holding on to it wasn't hurting you, it was hurting me." He swallowed hard. "I never meant to, I know," I interrupted gently. "You didn't plan it this way. But intentions don't erase consequences." "You lied to me, David. You made choices that I paid for. And for a long time, I thought forgiveness meant pretending it never happened. And now? Now I understand forgiveness is just refusing to let the past define me anymore." He leaned back, his hands trembling slightly. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's not for you. It's for me." There was a silence between us, not heavy, just quiet. Like two people finally standing on opposite sides of the same river, waving goodbye instead of shouting across. Then he asked something I didn't expect. Do you think Mason will forgive me? I thought about it carefully before answering. I don't think he blames you, I said. But he's watching. He's watching the way you show up, the way you listen. If you want his forgiveness, earn it. Be the man he needs now, not the one who broke us back then. David nodded, eyes glassy. I want to, he whispered. For him. Then start, I said simply. Before I left, he reached across the table. Shiyun, he said softly, I know I can't undo what I did. But you're stronger than anyone I've ever known. I just want you to know that. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch when he said my name. Goodbye, David, I said. And I meant it. When I returned home, Mason was sprawled on the floor with his sketch pad, working on a new drawing. How is it? He asked. Good, I said. We talked. It was quiet. He nodded. Quiet is good. That evening, I opened my laptop and began writing again. This time, not with the heaviness of retelling old wounds, but with the lightness of seeing them for what they were, just chapters. Not my whole story. Just part of it. Mason peeked over my shoulder. What are you writing now? A story, I said. Our story. He grinned. Can I be in it? You're the whole reason for it. Later that night, as I watched him sleep, I realized something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind you're afraid to lose, but the kind that grows roots. The kind you can build on. And for the first time, I knew the hardest parts were behind us. When I started this journey, I never imagined the world would see any of it. I thought our story would stay between these walls, whispered in quiet moments, captured in Mason's drawings, scribbled into my private journal at 2 a.m. But sometimes, the world finds you when you least expect it. It began with a phone call from Mason's art teacher. He's been invited to participate in the Regional Youth Art Showcase, she said, her voice warm with excitement. His work stood out. They want him to present his series, the ones about family, home, and identity. I blinked, gripping the phone tighter. A showcase? Like, a big one. Yes. Galleries, judges, the whole thing. They only choose a handful of students each year. He earned this. I thanked her, still trying to process the words. When I told Mason, he froze for a second, then broke into the widest smile I'd ever seen. They picked me, he said, almost in disbelief. They picked you, I said, hugging him. Because you're telling the truth with your art. And people see it. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Mason spent hours choosing which pieces to submit. He agonized over details, which frame would make a drawing feel more alive, which sketch best told his story. We visited the art supply store so many times the owner started greeting us by name. One night, as we were reviewing his work, Mason looked at me and said, "You know what I realized?" What? I don't feel embarrassed anymore. Embarrassed? About what? About not being like other kids. About my story. I smiled, my heart aching in the best way. You never had to be like anyone else. Yeah, he said softly. But I used to wish I was. And now? Now I think being different is what makes me, me. At the same time, my own life was shifting in ways I didn't expect. The small publishing house that had reached out to me sent a follow-up email. They wanted a full manuscript proposal for my memoir, not just essays, but a complete book. You have a voice people need, the editor wrote. Your story isn't just personal, it's universal. We all know what it's like to lose ourselves and find our way back. You give that journey words. For years, I never thought my voice mattered. But Mason's courage had lit something in me. If he could stand in front of a room and read his truth, maybe I could do the same on the page. So I said yes. Writing wasn't easy. There were nights I stared at a blank screen for hours, unable to find the words. There were chapters that hurt to write, moments I'd tried to bury, feelings I'd sworn I'd never revisit. But as the words formed, I realized something. The pain didn't own me anymore. The more I wrote, the more I saw the arc of our life, not just the betrayal and the anger, but the love, the resilience, the small victories. I wrote about the quiet nights Mason would fall asleep on my lap, the laughter we shared when making messy pancakes, the strength that came from simply staying. And I wrote about the moment I chose myself, not out of spite, but out of love. The day of Mason's art showcase arrived like a whirlwind. He wore a simple button-up shirt, and his drawings were displayed along a white wall, each one telling a piece of his story. His favorite, the one of us under the tree by the lake, hung right in the center. As people walked by, I watched their reactions. Some smiled softly. Some lingered, staring as if they could feel the story behind the lines. A woman turned to me and said, "These drawings are honest. You can tell he's lived them." "Yes," I said quietly. "He has." When Mason's name was called during the recognition ceremony, he walked onto the stage with a confidence I hadn't seen in him before. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was becoming a young man, one who knew who he was, where he came from, and why his story mattered. Afterward, he said, "Mom, I think this is what I want to do. I want to tell stories. Maybe not with words, but with pictures." I smiled. "Then you'll be amazing at it." That night, after the showcase, I sat on our small balcony with my laptop. I typed a single sentence at the top of a blank page. "This isn't a story about what I lost. It's a story about everything I built from the ruins." And for the first time, I felt ready to tell the world. Some endings don't come with fanfare. They come with soft mornings, the smell of warm tea, and the quiet sound of your child laughing in the other room. That's when you know you've made it through the storm. Months had passed since Mason's art showcase, but people still talked about his work. His teacher mentioned that a local gallery wanted to feature one of his pieces in a community exhibition. When I told him, his reaction wasn't disbelief this time. It was determination. "Which one do you think I should give them?" he asked. "The one that feels like you," I said. He thought for a moment and smiled. "Then I know exactly which one." He chose the drawing of the tree by the lake, the one where we sat side by side, not smiling but steady. He said it was the truest piece he'd ever made. Meanwhile, my memoir was nearly complete. Writing it had been like peeling back layers of my own soul, raw, exhausting, but freeing. I wrote about betrayal and silence, but I also wrote about laughter in tiny kitchens, nights under the stars, and the way love doesn't need permission to be real. The last chapter of my book wasn't about the pain. It was about Mason. It was about a boy who taught me that motherhood is not blood or biology. It's the act of staying, of showing up, of choosing love even when it's hard. I ended it with a single line: "We are not what broke us. We are what we built afterward." The first time Mason read a small section of my manuscript, he looked up with a quiet smile. "You made me sound like a superhero," he said. "That's because you are," I replied. He laughed. "You're the real hero." "Maybe we both are," I said, kissing the top of his head. One Sunday afternoon, we visited the lake again, the place where so much of our truth had first been spoken. The trees were fuller now, their leaves dancing in the breeze. Mason brought his sketch pad. I brought my journal. We didn't need to talk. We just sat there, side by side, letting the quiet wrap around us. "This is my favorite place," Mason said softly. "Mine too," I replied. He started sketching the water, his pencil moving effortlessly. "Do you think I'll be a real artist one day?" he asked. "You already are," I said. He smiled. "Then maybe you're already a real writer." That night, I sent the final manuscript of my memoir to the publisher. When I hit send, I didn't feel fear. I felt relief. Because no matter what happened next, whether the book sold or not, I had told our story. And that was enough. Weeks later, Mason's drawing hung proudly in the gallery. When we walked in and saw it framed, his face lit up in a way I'll never forget. People stood around it, pointing, nodding, whispering. But Mason didn't look at them. He looked at me. And I knew he understood something important. The story we had lived, the pain, the healing, the love, wasn't just ours anymore. It was something that could touch others too. That evening, as we walked home, Mason said, "Do you think Dad will see it?" "I think he will," I said. "And I think he'll be proud of you." Mason nodded. "I think I'm proud of me too." Our life wasn't perfect after that. Life never is. There were still long days, bills to pay, and moments of exhaustion. But there was also joy, quiet, simple joy that came from knowing we'd survived, we'd grown, and we'd made something beautiful from the mess. On the last page of my journal, I wrote a note just for us. This story started with brokenness, but it ends with beginnings, the kind that keep growing every time we choose each other. That night, Mason climbed into my lap, taller now, older now, but still my boy. "What happens next?" he asked sleepily. "Whatever we want," I said. "We get to write it."